First of all, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darryll Pines. I'm the Dean at University of Maryland, College Park. I'm also the chair of the EDC K-12 Engineering Education Committee. And I guess just by a show of hands, how many folks are on the K-12 committee? See Jeff? Yeah, I see you all. Great. If you want to be on the committee, just give me a card after this session or after sometime this afternoon at the break. And then the other thing I wanted to mention before we get into our session is, if you may have noticed in your bags, you received this little gadget. And some people have asked me, how do you use this? I'm surprised, engineers again. So you just put your smartphone right in there, download an app. And I did this for this very reason of this session. This is one way we connect to K-12 audiences, by having them download apps that are in the STEM sort of space. And students, when you're recruiting them, especially high school kids and middle school kids, get really excited about getting these little gadgets. That's why we gave them out to you, so you would get excited and think about doing the same thing at your university. So just a little plug for that little gizmo. So the P-12 engineering education is an area of growing interest across the country, winning attention not only in engineering communities, but within the general education community as well. The completion of the next generation science standards has provided a nice framework for states to incorporate concepts of engineering education throughout the K-12 educational landscape. In addition to the emergence of novel curricular and co-curricular experiences such as hackathons, competitions, maker fairs, computer fairs, has enabled educators to reach out to diverse communities and encourage their interest in future STEM careers. This session attempts to highlight those novel innovations in P-12 engineering education that involve curriculum, programs, policy, or processes that ensures that the U.S. is tapping into all of its talent to ensure the best minds pursue our field of engineering. So I'm delighted to have three outstanding panelists who come from different parts of the sort of K-12 space. And we've set them up really strategically. Christine's going to cover elementary, Nicole's going to cover middle school to high school, and BL Ramakrishna is going to cover high school and what you can do with grand challenges. So I'm not going to read their bios in the sake of brevity so that you can read their bios in the program. I think we want to hear from the speakers, and then we'll engage the audience for questions. So first person up is Dr. Christine Grant. She's the Senior Vice President and one of the co-founders of Engineering is Elementary, but also connected to the Museum of Science in Boston. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Grant.
Cunningham.
Oh, excuse me, Dr. Cunningham. I'm sorry, how did I do
It's okay.
that? Sorry.
I go by many names. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here to talk with you a little bit about a program I've been working on now for 14 years called Engineering is Elementary. And we started 14 years ago. Bringing engineering into the elementary school was basically unheard of. Many people thought we were kind of crazy because they didn't understand what it looked like or what we were trying to do. Some of you may be wondering the same thing, so I thought I would start today by showing you an example of what engineering looks like with these young children. So these are 6- and 7-year-olds in a first grade classroom. They're working as agricultural engineers, so they are designing a device, a hand pollinator, that will pick up and drop off pollen for a model flower.
We're going to make a hand pollinator. The hand pollinator needs to go to a flower, and when it touches the pollen, pollen needs to stick to it, and then when you go to another flower, the pollen would what?
Stick to that one.
Drop off and stick there, and take more and bring it to another flower. I want you to brainstorm ideas for your design.
I have an idea. We could use this one and then just bend it. Yeah, okay. So let's say number 3, but we'll just bend number 3. How about that? So it'll be half of my, it will look like your idea, but it will do the things that are in my idea. So it's both of ours mixed up. Yeah, but how are we going to put the pom-pom on? Put it on top. Look what we've created so far. We used the foil and we used the pipe cleaner. Yeah, so we're cutting the fur off and putting the fur on the handle.
All right, let's see if this hand pollinator works. Would you say your hand pollinator worked this time?
No.
What do you need to do?
Improve.
Good job. Here we go, testing. 1, 2, 3. Good job, 3-tap test. Okay, lift up your flower. Whoa, did it work?
Yes!
Well, congratulations. Give them a hand.
So as you can see, young children can engineer, and we think that young children should engineer because it helps them develop a set of habits of mind that equip them for the future. I'm sure you've all seen young children at play building sandcastles, bridges, forts, dollhouses, building them, knocking them down, and then starting again. I would argue that traditionally our schools have not supported these natural inclinations of students, but we need to do so. And so one of the things that I've really focused on over the last 2 decades is how we can bring engineering to young children while we make it relevant, accessible, and inclusive. There's a couple things that we are really committed to doing. One is that we want to create problem solvers, some of whom hopefully will go on through and actually become engineers. But equally as important, we want to make sure we reach all students. To do this, we wanted to scale nationally. So we had to think really carefully about how to do that, which required a lot of testing in real classrooms with real kids to understand their constraints, and also basing things in the research. My personal commitment to education is making sure that all students, particularly those who are underrepresented, underserved, and underperforming, have access to science and engineering activities and careers. And so we thought really carefully when we started the program about how we could make sure that these types of students engaged in engineering. And as a result, we developed 14 inclusive design principles that underlie all of the curricula that we create. When we started, we had no idea what engineering looks like with young kids. And so this was a question I asked my staff. How would we know when high quality engineering education was happening? As a result, over a number of years, we came up with 16 what we call engineering habits of mind. And these are things we'd like to see, ideally in classrooms, as they develop young engineers. So for instance, we want them thinking about criteria and constraints, working with teams, persisting in learning through failure. These are good skills not only to get them ready for engineering should they choose to pursue it as a career, but also for their lives. We've now developed, or in the process of developing, 5 different curricula for young children. So our flagship program, the EIE curriculum, is for grades 1 through 5. As a result of educators asking, we developed 2 after-school curricula for elementary and middle school, and we're now in the process of doing preschool and kindergarten. If you think elementary is hard, try doing it with 4-year-olds, but it's really fun. They are natural engineers. As I mentioned, we're focusing on problem habits of mind, and one of the things that's central to engineering is problem solving and innovation. And to do this, we work on helping kids recognize there's a problem-solving process that they can use. When we started this, we met with elementary teachers, the experts, about how we might communicate this to young children. And they indicated that you could have 5 steps, 1 hand, and no more, or their little kids could not remember it. As we've expanded, we now have an 8-step process for middle school, and even more difficult, we got it down to 3 steps for the littlest 3- and 4-year-olds. So this is really the centerpiece of what we want every child to experience. Equally as important, though, we want to make sure that kids make the connection between science, math, and engineering. It's not just tinkering. They need to be able to draw upon those things and recognize they're going to need to be taking courses that will equip them to go and do the engineering work they do. So our program, our grade 1 through 5 program, connects each of our 20 engineering units with a commonly taught topic in science in elementary school. And the kids apply the science that they've learned as they solve an engineering design problem. Let's look at what this looks like in a real classroom. So this class has been studying magnets as part of their science class, and now they're using what they've learned about the poles in magnets to design a little maglev transportation system.
Alright, so is that connecting or repelling?
On a machine.
Check if that's repelling or connecting.
That's connecting.
Now we will test the magnetic levitation
Transportation system.
which looks like it's attracting me.
Are you sure?
But what I think is happening is this side here is like a different pole than this. So it's trying to slide over.
Okay.
It's on this one repelling, but it's connecting on this one.
Because if you do this,
Okay, so
it's like, it's not
Trying to get
staying
inside
straight.
there.
Yeah, it's trying to go like that.
So
It's
I
trying to hop
think
itself.
if we made it a little bit wider or lost some of the magnets that run through the middle, it would work better.
And when we improve.
Ready?
Yes,
We made it. We made it. We made it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. High five to everyone. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So another habit I might want kids to recognize is that there's multiple different ways to solve a problem. Engineers know this, but it's really uncommon in schools for problems to have more than one solution. So we try to have children understand that they can have multiple ways, as you see here with the variety of leg braces that students made in one class. Similarly, and perhaps most important, we want them to understand that failure and persistence are a natural part of engineering. So you see the children recognizing this and really affiliating with it. In the bottom corner, one of the students says, "Now I know how engineers feel when the things they design don't work the first time, but I still want to be one." Which leads us to another really important part, both as an engineer at the elementary levels and perhaps all the way through college, which is having the identification and affiliation with engineering as something that they can do. And we see a really good example of this in a second grade class, where a group of students has just done some testing of how to make a strong wall that's going to help keep the bunny out of the garden that it's been nibbling. And here the teacher is transitioning from one activity they did some testing to the final design challenge where they'll apply what they've known. Let's take a look at how she sets her students up.
At this point, do you guys feel like materials engineers? Yes. Why? Anybody? Yes.
That's because we already did like 3 of the engineering design process. And we asked the questions and we answered what are solutions.
Okay. Anybody else? Do you feel like a materials engineer, and why? What makes you feel that way? Yes, Marcus.
Because since I've been here all 3 days on our material engineering process, I feel engaged and interested in what's probably going to happen next, just as a material engineer would, and think I'm really ready.
You are? Okay, wonderful. I think you guys are all ready too.
And then she doesn't stop there. This teacher goes on to connect what the kids have done with engineering in the real world.
Who can be an engineer?
Anyone.
Anyone, okay? And I hope that everybody realizes that, all right?
Yeah. Children.
Even children. So not just adults, but even children. Now, of course, if you're an engineer as an adult, guess what?
You know more.
Well, you will, but you also get paid to do, because you can actually do it as a job. You can be an engineer as a career. You can go to college, learn more about the field, and then eventually you can spend every single day, for example, being a materials engineer, working with a bunch of materials, figuring out how they go together, making new materials from existing materials, okay? It is a wealth of opportunities for people who are interested in engineering.
So it's those kinds of sentiment that we try to develop really young in children. They're capable of doing it, and then we hope as they progress through middle school, high school, and beyond, they can tap those inclinations and lead them into college-level study more prepared to take on the kind of work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. I mean, see the joy on the faces of those kids is amazing. Next up is Miss Nikole Collins-Puri.
These were extra slides.
She's the CEO of Tech Bridge Girls, and she's going to connect you to some of the middle school to high school activities that you can do for other diverse populations. So, Ms. Collins-Puri.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to
give you a little bit of sense of what we do at TechBridge Girls. We've been around for 17 years, and it really came from testing a hypothesis that our founder had, that the world said girls are not interested in STEM. And being the academic and researcher she was like, well, let me find the research that supports that hypothesis. And there wasn't any. So she took it upon herself to start to build that body of work. And what she found through focus groups and additional partnerships with like Girl Scouts, and found that it's not that girls are not interested in STEM, it's that our environments, the pedagogy, the social and cultural norms have left girls out of STEM. So that sparked her vision for TechBridge Girls, which inspired girls of color from low-income communities to discover a passion for STEM. And we do this through our gender and cultural responsive after-school and professional development program to have a result where we're empowering the next generation of girl innovators and leaders to change the world. And in our after-school program, it's really about inspiring girls of color to pursue STEM. So in Washington, D.C., the Bay Area in California, Greater Seattle, we serve about 600 girls a year through 31 schools, really creating this environment that helps our girls pursue STEM. And then on our professional development side, this is really about building the capacity of educators in school and in out-of-school time so that they have and can deliver STEM enrichment programming that engages girls. And everything that we do, girls are at the center. So we take a human-centered design approach. Girls' needs, their interests, what are their barriers, and what are the accelerators that will propel them through this ecosystem that you see here in the middle. But we also know it's not just the girls that support this path. We really have to support the surrounding ecosystem that will help propel and clear a pathway for them to get to achieve those aspirations and that STEM identity. So our model really focuses on these pieces around our ecosystem. We start with growth mindset. So it's important, especially for girls who hold on to this feeling of needing to be perfect, that you may not be perfect at something today, but just like as an athlete, over time you get better at it if you practice. And then it also allows girls to get really comfortable with failure. Because again, it starts to demystify that in engineering, the greatest success is sometimes in your failure. And to embrace it instead of not steer away from it or turn away from it altogether because of the fact that you didn't perfect it. We train our role models who inspire, connect, engage, and transform the lives of our girls. So this is our secret sauce. We can all day give great curriculum that we develop, research-driven, but if they don't really see a real-world person inspiring or being that, it is a disconnect for them. And don't get me wrong, I believe in the mantra, if you can see it, you can be it, but we know just from the fact of our Hidden Figures experience that sometimes you can't see it, so you can be it. But it makes the door a little bit easier. So role models become really important, as well as family engagement. So this is where, for many of our girls' families, are huge influencers on where they will go to school, what they will pursue, and the motivation in which they walk toward a certain path. So we help our parents demystify the industry, the field, help them navigate what their daughters need to do in order to get on a path to pursue STEM courses, majors, and ultimately the career. And then with our educators, as well as with our in-house program coordinators, we are giving good pedagogy. We are creating good practices and tactics to engage girls. And we know hands-on activities is critical to that. They need to realize what they are theoretically learning. And then we are able to connect them to careers and let them explore the industry through career exploration. We actually take our girls to Google or our local universities so that they can actually see what it means to be a computer scientist or a chemical engineer or work on a top-notch project from NASA. And all of this is undergirded by gender and cultural responsive practices. That just goes back to what are the needs of our girls? What are their experiences? What are their environments? And what are the things that they feel resonate with their being and identity that need to show up in their learning and pursuit of this career? So we were asked to talk about innovative programs that we're doing. And you know, when I really thought about it, the two that I'm going to describe is not necessarily innovative, but what it is about intentionality. So as many of you know, and I think tomorrow there's a discussion about it, is around the Makers Fair. And so what we learned is that this is a great opportunity to bring people together that are inventors and creators and tinkerers and really creating kind of the next technology for our world. But what we saw was that it was a special club that our girls could not see themselves in. And so what we said is that we also need to redefine the maker and the narrative around the maker. So that starts with creating a girl-friendly space and environment. So what are the visuals that you are creating in your space that engages girls to feel like they belong? Are you utilizing just Star Wars and Warcraft kind of images, or are you utilizing abstract shapes and the environment to show the equivalent of STEM? Developing engineering and technical concepts and practices. So we really do focus and undergird our curriculum that we design in-house around next generation science standards. We believe that this is at least a fundamental foundation for us to be able to give a baseline to help equal the level playing field within their school environment, but also in their out-of-school environment. Identify a project and go through the engineering design process. So I light up whenever I see young kids talking about the engineering design process and the concepts within it, because it is a practical tool beyond just engineering. It's a practical tool within any industry. And once you have a grasp on what these components are or concepts, it really allows you to be a true problem solver that can be a critical thinker to the most pressing issues of your community and in your environments. And like I said, connecting the girls with role models are so critical for us so that they can really see what another maker looks like. At the beginning of our year, of our program year, we always ask a girl to draw a picture of an engineer or scientist. And can you imagine what they might draw? Just to name it out. Who do you think they might think about or draw?
A guy.
White male. White male, Albert Einstein, pocket protector, sad face, balding, like really. And they're like, and you want me to be that? No, thank you. Right? So what we really do is utilize our role models to show that they have dogs, they have children, they like to go hiking on the weekend, they love to travel. Because this is more than just a job, but this is also a life that you have integrated. And then a year-long investment. So for us, you know, we're trying to move a needle. And it's important for programs that want to spark and ignite and have that short-term experience. But for us, it's a year-long experience. Because we truly want to transform and get our girls stuck on STEM, which ultimately gets them to a path of a maker fair. And if you haven't been to one, they're extraordinary, and we believe our girls need to be a part of it. So we plug them into the standard ones, but we also create ones so that they do see a different way in which this system can be created. Another area is really around creating community changers. The research tells us for girls to be engaged in STEM, you know, or tinkering or making or any of that, it has to have a purpose. they have to see that this work has the ability to transform their communities, their lives, the world. And so what we do in our middle school program is that we utilize a community project to drive the whole entire year, where they are kind of creating something with an end result that is going to impact the experiences and circumstances of their own community. So we would partner with organizations or corporations, like for example in Oakland, we're partnering with the Oakland Port of Oakland to look at water. And so this really allows our girls to see the reality and the realization of what they're learning in the classroom, but also translating into real world experience that impacts their everyday life. And then exposing our girls to career opportunities and leaders who are using STEM to create a better community. I mean, this goes back to career exploration, engaging them with role models, and truly having the ability to see that STEM has this powerful ability to not only change the circumstances of the world, but also the circumstances of their economic being. So as you saw in my first slide, we talked about girls from low-income communities. And we all know that it is really important that STEM careers are some of the most high-paying careers at the very entry-level position. So we really want to see our girls move and have the ability to truly fulfill on their full potential. So what's been some of our impact in our high school programs? Because of our Maker Faire explicitly, but just in general, our high school program, because it's been our longest running programs, 88% of our girls said they were more confident. And confidence is underrated in most of our conversations. It is so important because this is where you get resiliency, this is where you get grit, this is where you get perseverance. So if you're increasing the confidence of a girl, you're increasing her power to be able to persist, because the reality is our girls today are not going to realize the change in the industry or even in your colleges, right? So we really need to focus on confidence and how you build and empower our girls. The other area is that 91% of our girls said that TechBridge helped them think about their career goals. So when they first started, they might have wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor because that's what they see, or a model, because that's what they see every day. But on the flip side of the end of our programming, because we track and collect data and evaluate it on every year, is that they see themselves as chemical engineers or material engineers. And then 82% of our girls said that TechBridge increased their interest in studying engineering in college, which is all about you all, right? So there is not an interest gap. So what I need your help in is, like, I'm getting them ready. I'm building that pipeline that we heard is not there. But what we need to do is get them past year 1 and 2 when they can begin their post-secondary career. And one of our girls said, TechBridge was a safe space for me to learn things and build things while having lots of fun doing so. So our work is truly rooted in the needs of our girls. I think intentionality is what I would love to just leave with you. You know, we've had the conversation about diversity right before lunch, and this is hard work. It's not going to happen because you just put words on a piece of paper or you put people in a room to talk about it. You really have to check the culture, you have to check your policies, you have to check the way in which you do business in order to fully move this needle forward. Our girls are ready. They're waiting to be embraced and led into this great future and opportunity. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins-Puri, for sharing your holistic approach for TechBridge girls. Our next speaker is Dr. B.L. Ramakrishna, who's the Executive Director of the Grand Challenge Scholars Program at the National Academy of Engineering. And he's going to share what you can do at the high school level related to the Grand Challenges.
Thank you, Darryll. I think I'm really happy that some of the things that I wanted to kind of say in my things have been already touched upon. That's so nice to hear that. And one of them was the next generation science standards, which is really is changing this. This is what the situation was, that engineering is not often explicitly in the curriculum. I think there was a question in the morning also about the very same point. Engineering is not in the curriculum in middle school and high school, but what they're doing could be construed as engineering. So what I claim is, I actually put this up with some, being gentle on some of us here who have come to engineering through other methods. Like, how many of you have come to engineering through like physics or solid state or applied mathematics? I see a few. So I am also one of those. So just to be kind of gentle on those, I put the S and T so that you can read them. Otherwise, I would have just had the E go all the way go to the ceiling and S and T and M almost not showing up. But that's just. So how do we kind of get this into the curriculum? I think the previous speaker mentioned about how it's important to have a context and a meaning and a purpose for what engineering you do. That's what attracts people to engineering. In fact, there was a definition of engineering from, Darryll gave a talk recently about a complicated definition of what ABET and other societies say what engineering is. It's extremely long-winded and sometimes doesn't capture the essence of what engineering is. And our president, Dan Moat from National Academy of Engineering, has come up with this, a very simple definition of engineering, which kind of is for the, he has underlined, as I said, the two main lines. It's for life and for planet. It's a global definition of engineering. It's all about people and the planet. So it's making our life sustainable, safe, healthy, and joyful. I mean, the joyful part is really wonderful to have. It's not just about just surviving, but also having a high quality of living, etc. So can we kind of translate this vision into a program? And so the way that the National Academy kind of translated that vision into actual research and also education is through coming up with these 14 specific grand challenges. But it doesn't mean that these are the only 14, but these are at the present the things that have been chosen, and they can evolve over time, and some get somewhat solved and some new challenges come in. But the fact of the matter remains that we still need engineers who have to be trained in a way that they can address these grand challenges, whatever they may be. And somebody was mentioning about, we can't even predict what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So the jobs and the challenges that they're going to be addressing are we are not even aware of what they are right now. So, but they have to be ready to learn, ready to know how to address those challenges. And again, capturing some of the points that were already brought up here, these grand challenges can form as a kind of an ideal and a coherent theme for K-12 instruction. And because they are cross-disciplinary in their nature, they are context, they're filled with context, and they have the societal connection. I think I've heard even in the morning from the president's address that the social embeddedness, we have to know where we are, who we are, and so to make a difference in our community. The community is not only your local community, but also the global community. So the societal connection is extremely important. So can we bring these through lesson plans and activities at various levels in high schools, in school? So I'm going to give you a few examples. This offers a wide range of opportunities, but I'm just going to highlight 3 in high schools just to show the different kind of a degree of engagement of the grand challenges for engineering in high schools. I think from the NC State, the dean is here. I think this school, the Wake Forest STEM Early College School, is on the campus of NC State. They have adopted the grand challenges of engineering as a theme for all the 4 years and for all the subjects. So the whole school is like a magnet school, which does science, math, language arts, and everything in the context of the grand challenges. So that's kind of a very unique and a very special example. The second one is in Fairfax, it's close to Washington, D.C., where they take the students away from their classes twice a week, 2 afternoons a week, and working on grand challenge theme projects. So that's Edison High School, where the students are in a regular school environment, but a small cohort of them is taken into this special program. So that's kind of the other model that you can use. It may be more easy to implement. The third one is just having experiments and projects which are based on various grand challenges. And that is happening more often, and that's just one example I just mentioned there in Tesla High School. We can also have in middle school and also after school and informal learning environments as well, and I've given some examples of those as well. In middle school, we can do things like this, that as the curriculum, we have to kind of align with the curriculum and the standards, what they need to be learning, what concepts they need to be learning, and how you can kind of map it to the activities under these kind of big umbrella themes. So in one example of a school where the 6th grade is kind of water, water is one of the grand challenge, providing clean water to the world, and then the 7th grade was health, and the 8th grade was solar. So as the curriculum progress from like chemistry oriented to biology oriented to kind of physics oriented in the grades, also the grand challenges can also be mapped according to those themes. There have been programs called Grand Challenge K-12, which is an effort that it's kind of hopefully an effort that's going to be much more widely pursued by both universities and the K-12, jointly working together to create just activities and lesson plans. So there is maybe a few hundred right now on the web that we can get for that. So even for like modules, you can use it. It's not necessarily the whole year that you have to be. There is also competitions, and this is something that engineering the environment competition, where there's about 10,000 students who are taking part in that competition right now. And that's based on the grand challenges themes, and every year the theme kind of changes to another theme. So that's one other kind of engagement that the grand challenges is having in kind of K-12. And the summer programs is the third, where it's a purely after school. The competition was also partly in school activity, and then they competed as teams representing their schools. The summer program is mainly an enrichment program that is outside of school. And so on. So those are the 3 examples in middle schools. What I want to kind of finally end with is this program that is now the Grand Challenge Scholars Program in the undergraduate level. These are the 5 competencies that are required to be delivered, and each university does it, according to their own abilities and strengths and relationships they have, the programs that they have already that they can leverage, etc. And I just highlighted the 5th one. The reason I just kind of, we'll hear more about it, I think, lunchtime tomorrow in the session that Jenna Carpenter is leading. But the 5th component, the social consciousness or social embeddedness, was again highlighted again today early in the morning, is an activity that the students in the undergraduate classroom can take to mentor, to be also teacher, helping the teacher to facilitate engineering lesson plans which are kind of based on the grand challenges. So they are looking for opportunities to be engaged in K-12, and that also addresses one of the competencies that they need to achieve. So it's a win-win situation where the undergraduate students are looking for opportunities, and then the K-12 system can also use these can be role models for the middle school and K-12, because they're much more amenable to listen to them rather than old bald people like me going to the K-12 environment. So this is something that I think we can take advantage of. And I guess I just mentioned these are the 2 ways that you can partner with the Grand Challenge Scholar Program. And there is a lot of them already around the country, and it's hopefully growing. The numbers of universities in this consortium is about 40 right now across the country, and our goal is about maybe 100 plus in about 3 years. So that's the kind of the goal, and that will have a network of universities around the country which will be able to connect to the environments, K-12 environments in their local regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama. So what we would like to do is engage the audience for questions for the panelists, but I'm going to ask the first question, so think about your question that you might want to ask the panelists. And part of what we tried to do was to give you an elementary school view, a middle school view, and then a high school view of what you possibly could do in partnership with your own region to set up an interaction in a K-12 or P-12 education. So as President Rosenberg from FIU stated, He said we shouldn't be about just high tech. We should be about high touch as well in our region and in our communities. And so what would you say to the deans of engineering in the room of why they should care about P-12 education, engineering education specifically, but why should they care since their primary role is higher education? Christine.
I'd say those students come from somewhere, and we hear a lot from university faculty, oh, the students aren't prepared, or they don't know anything. They always have opinions of what they're not. So it's your opportunity to get in and help shape the students who will hopefully end up working with you in schools of engineering. But one of the things we need is folks who understand and have the expertise to work with K-12 educators. I have yet to meet an elementary teacher who has a degree in engineering. I'm sure there's one somewhere in the United States, but they don't go through school to take engineering classes. Their course of study doesn't allow room for it. So while they may be willing to do engineering, they are always happy to have experts in real life figures working with them to help them get smarter about what engineering actually is. And I think that's a nice role for the faculty or for the graduate students who might work with you to give back to the community and help grow the next generation.
Thank you. How about Nikole? What would you say?
I mean, it's critically important. You know, it is your pipeline into your colleges. And so, I mean, when in our program, we are toting your college programs. And so this is the bridge that leads them to that. I mean, we utilize, for example, in our Bay Area, we utilize University of California, San Francisco. We actually utilize their graduate students to help be role models to our grantees, or through the Department of San Francisco Children and Family, their grantees who provide after-school programming. We connect them to those out-of-school time providers because we know that there's a gap in the content knowledge and the theory of certain aspects of STEM, but we utilize the graduate students to be role models, just like I will pull an industry person to be a role model for our girls. So I think there's so many ways that into higher education can plug in, not only through you're getting a pipeline of the students, but you can help build the capacity in which is lacking in the system right now.
BL?
Yeah, perhaps I'll add another perspective to this, which you know, is that it's actually a win-win situation. It's not just that you're helping the pipeline and getting better quality students coming into the university, but it also helps the members of the university, the faculty, the staff, and the students when once they become involved in that. So I'll give you one example. You know, there was a program for about 10 years at the National Science Foundation called GK12 program. I don't know, some of you might have been PIs, co-PIs in that. So that came from the Division of Graduate Education in NSF. It did not come from, because it was a K-12 focused program, it did not come from, you know, the K-12 piece of the NSF. The reason it came from graduate education was they figured that the benefit for the graduate students to become role models, to communicate their research in ways that is, you know, easily understandable to the public and the students, etc., made them better researchers, made them better communicators, and eventually better teachers when they went on to get faculty jobs. So I think we, you know, even selfish interests in that sense, the universities could be more involved as well.
Okay, we'd like to take some questions from the audience. Is there a microphone that we can have? Go to Ken. And to... And please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Ken Luchin from Boston University. Thank you very much. Spectacular stuff. I have a sort of a comment and then a specific question for Nikole. But first of all, Mike, I was struck by, one of the things I was struck by is the need to have a more continuity between the three kinds of programs. So you have this sort of sustained messaging going on. And then what you might be thinking about along those lines. You talked about exciting the kids and giving them confidence, the girls, in the Tech Bridge program. but there's another 4 years to go, if it's middle school, before they even hit us, no matter what we do in our first 2 years to do that. And then similarly, you talked about the idea of how to scale these programs, which is actually some of the biggest challenges you have. You're only in San Francisco and DC, I think?
We're in DC, Greater Seattle, and the Bay Area.
Okay. And then I'm not sure how national your program is, but I would suggest using undergraduate engineering students as ambassadors to go in and involve your programs. There's a heck of a lot more of them than there are PhD students that want to do this, and PhD engineering students that are going to want to do this. So that's just a general comment you can respond to. And just a very specific question, what do you need to scale your program?
Well, actually, I have to say, so we are a long-time recipient of National Science Foundation funds. Probably they funded at least 3 programs over almost a 10-year span for us. And the last grant that we received was a scaling grant.
To make it more national, you mean?
Huh?
To become more national?
Yes, because of the success that we've seen in our after-school program, that's enabled us to scale in DC and Greater Seattle. And what we found, and I'm 8 months in as the new CEO, and I've been doing a lot of assessment of our organization. What was clear is that our program was scalable. What we have seen in the past almost 16 years in the Bay Area is exactly what we experienced in our Seattle and DC. What was the challenge for us was the strain on infrastructure. That was more of the issue, is that the scaling of the fidelity of the program was equal or quality, but the infrastructure and strain it took on the organization stretched us. So program replication, not an issue for us. We've tested it, we've asked the right questions, we retested it, we modify along the way, but it now is really looking insular to make sure that we are able to sustain at an even broader growth, because people are asking us to do that.
Could you partner with individual universities?
We would love to do that, and right now we're in the middle of a strategic planning process to define what those partnerships will look like for us going forward, because we do get a lot of ask. And that's kind of also why we have this capacity building work, because we know that our direct service work is very expensive. It's about $2,500 per student right now to operate our after-school programming. So we know if we can get our curriculum and create a good training model, that we can increase the capacity of other educators on the way in our model and our curriculum, then we have greater reach to do that. And even in our professional development, it's a year-long process. We're not only giving you the curriculum, we're giving you observations, feedback, coaching throughout the year too, to make sure that the fidelity of what we've taught you is actually being demonstrated in the classroom. Undergraduate.
I think that's a question. Joe?
Thanks. Joe Helbley from Dartmouth College. I have a question from Museum of Science and Tech Bridge programs about the P through 8 efforts that you focused on. You spoke to us very specifically today about the E in STEM. You didn't speak about STEM, and you didn't broaden it further to talk about STEAM, which I think many of us here in this room would have strong opinions on. When I've spoken to elementary school teachers and even some high school teachers, there's been a strong push or pressure to move in that direction or package engineering in that context to somehow make it more appealing and broadly palatable. In part, now I'm revealing my bias, in part because I think of a general lack of understanding of what engineering and the creative elements of engineering are. Have you encountered that? How have you addressed it?
Is he asking about STEAM?
Oh yeah, yeah, STEAM. So I have to tell you a little story about my first foray in STEAM in front of the New York City auditorium full of teachers, and someone asked pretty much about STEAM, and I learned. I basically said to them, that's great, I'm not going to be the person to get into an airplane designed by an artist. So I got a lot of email about that comment. I said it a little more tactfully. But I think there is something that is common to science, engineering, and mathematics, a way of thinking, a way of looking at the world. I don't deny that there is an artistic element that might be there, other sources of creativity. But I come back to, I'm not going to go into an airplane designed by an artist, as there's some things that different populations know. So I think there's intersection. I think schools push there for many reasons. I believe also it's a great way for the arts to get tapped into STEM funding, being my cynical point of view. And I do think there's some interactions, and you can pull kids in, and we get kids engaged in projects when they realize they're actually going to be able to do some design work as well. But fundamentally, you have to be able to back what you do with science and mathematics, or they're not building your $200 million bridge until they know it's going to stand. And I think that's where the analogy breaks down. So I don't personally talk about STEAM. It's out there. I've learned to just let it be out there and stick to STEM, given my one little, the backlash to my one little comment.
And for us, it's not an either or, it's integrated. We don't feel, for us, because a lot of our girls will start wanting to kind of have that art sense. So we meet girls where they are. So if that's where the entry point is, we start there and wrap it around with the rest of the ST&M, right? So it's not an either or, and we always think about what Steve Jobs says. He's like, yeah, I can make this really cool iPhone with great technology, but if it doesn't look good, nobody's gonna buy it, right? So this is not an either or conversation, it's an and it's like how you integrate. And for youth, you gotta meet them where they are. So if they're, we do lip balm to demonstrate chemical engineers. We do bath fizzies to demonstrate chemical engineers, because that's what girls are going to connect with first, and then we wrap it around with all the concepts and the principles, and they get there a lot quicker versus going straight to the theory or straight to the principle and concept, and then maybe three after-school programs down the line, they finally oh, that's what a chemical reaction is? So for us, it's an and it's integrated. And we don't look at it separately.
The question here.
Aaron Bobick from WashU, and actually you just said most of what I wanted to add to it, so I'll just say the following. I think one of our challenges right now is this notion of you're an engineer or you're not. And one of the resistances, one of the barriers is that there are people who are just may or may not want to be comfortable being on one side or the other. And I would actually put it to most of us that one of the challenges we're facing right now in policy, the general population, the integration across, is this separation, that there is this other set of people. And while it's fine to try to pull underrepresented folks, whether it's demographics or ethnic or gender, onto that side, I think for the 21st century, especially within the United States, one of our advantages might be to remove the distinction, nurture the creativity, nurture the engagement between policy, humanities, and engineering in a variety of ways, make it fundamental to the discourse. And so one of the things that I would hope would happen in the elementary school and in the high schools is that there's not this notion of you are this thing. It actually pained me a little bit to see you could be an engineer. What I want to see is everyone to know both engineering and Shakespeare. And right now, we work on making sure they know the Shakespeare, even in high school, but we don't actually get this notion of what does it mean to do engineering, to understand the combination between science, math, and creativity that is those things, which is actually where the A comes from. It's not so much art as it is creativity. Mm-hmm. You do want to fly in airplanes that are built by creative people.
Yeah, you want to sit in those seats.
That's right.
Right. They're much more comfortable.
So I just put it out there as a comment about this nature of a self-image as an engineer versus this notion that engineering is something that is woven through the fabric of what we do.
So, I mean, can I just comment on this? I think this is a very important point for our field, because I think what you're saying, and President Dan Moda of the National Academy says the same thing you say. He basically says one of our problems is that we're seen as an addition, not part of the core experience, right? That engineering should be as fundamental as the liberal arts or as Shakespeare is in high school and elementary and middle school, but not every student gets it. It's a Project Lead the Way. It's an extended program. It's an after-school program. And you're absolutely right. So somehow we have to change that going forward. But great point. Greg.
So, Bill, what do you think about diversity as a 15th Grand Challenge?
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear, sir. Can you repeat?
What do you think about diversity as the 15th Grand Challenge?
Yeah, in fact, there was a meeting just last month when a person addressed the National Academy of Engineering's president saying, you have completely missed the boat, you have only 14, and the 15th should be this, that what you mentioned. But I think, I think it's a part, it's not necessarily a challenge by itself, it's infused in everything that we do and everything that we want to achieve. I think if you make it as a separate challenge, then it becomes kind of, less important and less even central to everything. I feel it should be kept out of the technical challenges or the societal challenges in the kind of which are kind of engineering centric. And this is more like a social and other things which kind of envelop the entire, the grand challenges. So I think keeping it away from the 14 is what I feel is the right thing to do. Yeah.
So we're getting the red light, which means our session is over. So let's thank BL, Ramakrishna, Nikole Collins-Puri, and Dr. Christine Cunningham. Give them a round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to take a moment to switch out the presenters and microphones, and then we'll get started again. Thank you.